Sure.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this public meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We are always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting includes an opportunity for those attending to comment on items on the published agenda or other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation. Law limits discussion of individual, personnel, and confidential matters. We hope that our meetings provide useful opportunities for communication between the board and the community. Thank you for attending.
As required under the Open Public Meeting Act, NJSA 1046 et sequentia, adequate notice was given calling this meeting. It was authorized by the Board of Education and forwarded to the municipal clerk, Princeton Packet, and the Times on January 6, 2022, and it was distributed to the schools and others on the standard distribution list. The board reserves the right to enter into executive session during all meetings of the Board of Education. Board Policy 2230, recording devices, requires that we inform those attending this virtual Zoom meeting that the proceedings are being recorded. This meeting is not being live streamed. Public members who wish to make comment at the appropriate time, as noted in the agenda or added by the presiding officer, shall raise their hand virtually at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Once called upon, a member of the public will be requested to unmute themselves by clicking the mute button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. The representative of the sending district is authorized to vote on such matters that affect sending district students or affect the governance of the Princeton Public Schools, as more specifically designated in NJSA 18A38.1. In the event this statute is amended, the law shall take precedence over this bylaw. Sending district votes pertaining to personnel actions referred to high school, central administrative, and district-wide staff only votes otherwise are considered abstentions.
Thank you, Mr. Bolden. Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Daphne Kendall,
Here.
Sheltuck Ponder,
Present.
Betsy Baglio,
Here.
Beth Barron, Debbie Bronfeld,
Here.
Dean Durbin,
Present.
Mara Franceschi.
Here.
Ryan McDonald,
Present.
Susan Cantor,
Here.
Bob Christopher.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Bolden. We're going to move on to item D1, adoption of the minutes for November 22nd, 2022. Can I get a motion, please? Rob, second, Brian.
Daphne Kendall,
Here. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Doing too many things at once.
Sheltuck
Yes.
Ponder,
Yes.
Betsy Baglio,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Dean Durbin,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Ryan McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Bob Christopher.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bolden. So before we get started tonight, we have a little unusual meeting. We have to break on or around 8:30 for a previously scheduled hearing with parents. So we will try to get through as much of the meeting as possible and have an opportunity for public comment before, but we will make a motion to go into closed session. We will do what we have to do in closed session, and then we will come back and complete our meeting. I also wanted to just take a minute and express the board's condolences on the passing of former Littlebrook kindergarten teacher, Evelyn Saldick. She was a teacher at Littlebrook from 1961 to 1995. She passed away last week, and the board sends our deepest condolences to her family. In the communication we got about her passing was an article from 1972 that was in the New York Times. And there was a bus driver shortage. See, Rebecca, some things never change. And the teacher went and got her commercial driver's license so she could drive her classes around to field trips. So I'm not suggesting that any of our teachers go do that, but Miss Saldick certainly set a great example, and we send our deepest condolences to the family. I also just briefly wanted to say that there was an incident within the past few weeks at our middle school. It was deemed not credible, and it was handled appropriately by our administration. And I just want to affirm, and I think we can't say it enough, that we reject all hate speech and anti-Semitism. And this morning I was listening to something on TV, and there was a quote that was said by Martin Luther King. I'm only going to say part of it, but he said, "Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance." And we all have an obligation to speak out whenever we hear acts or words of hatred. And with that, we'll get on with our meeting. But thank you. Dr. Kelly, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Board President Kendall, for your remarks. Because of the time, I'm going to turn the mic over to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction to provide the Start Strong results report. And also, after she's finished, I will ask the board if you have any comments on the draft calendars. We did share it with SAC. So tonight is for the board to provide your feedback. And what we plan to do is to bring back on the January, I think the 24th, or whenever the January board meeting will be, for final approval. So Dr. Tu?
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Bolden, do you mind letting me share my screen?
Yeah, sorry about that. It defaults.
Okay.
You're good
Oh.
now.
Thank you so much. So as Dr. Kelly said, hi, everyone. I am Dr. Tu. With me tonight is Sarah Moore, our Supervisor of Elementary Education, and Keisha Smith-Carrington, our Supervisor of Humanities for grades 6 to 12. And Dr. Joy Barnes-Johnson, our Science Supervisor, will be joining us shortly. So I feel like we've just done this. We were here presenting to you in October with our NJSLA spring results. It was the first time we had a standardized assessment in 3 years. And so now we're doing, well, the NJSLA in 3 years, I should say. So now we're going to talk to you about Start Strong and NJGPA. So let me just clarify what NJGPA is. That is our new graduation proficiency assessment. So our current seniors took this assessment in the spring. At the time, we were told by the NJDOE that it was going to be one of their graduation requirements. And after districts took the assessment, the DOE said, nope, just kidding. It's going to be a field test this year. And starting with the class of 2024, our current juniors, it will be mandated. For those of you, parents out there and community members, this is like the HESPA or the HSBTs. This is the 11th grade sort of graduation proficiency assessment that the state has brought back. Other news with Start Strong, which is our fall round of testing data that is required by the state. Once again, we were told that this would be a temporary pandemic measure. And then the state communicated that it was coming back this year, and it looks like it's going to be back again in the next school year as well. They have a 5-year contract. With Start Strong, we were releasing our individual student reports next week to families. So be on the lookout. On Monday, I will be sending out an email blast explaining the ISRs. And on Tuesday, we're really trying to be more environmentally conscious. We're going to be sending it directly via school messenger email. You will get a PDF of your Start Strong report if your child tested. And then from there, you'll be able to print it out. Or if you want to request a copy from the schools, we will have a printed copy for you. All right, so I know we have a time crunch. So what is the Start Strong assessment? So it's for ELA in grades 4 through 9, in math, the same grades except 4 through 8, and then course content for algebra 1, 2, and geometry, and science grades 6, 9, and 11. So for example, if you had a 5th grader last year, they took 5th grade science, ELA, and math, and then this year they took 6th grade science, ELA, and math. And it helps us sort of look at cohorts across fall and spring and really start the school year off and saying what areas of support do they need. These are shorter assessments than the NJSLA assessments, and they really are based on very small subsets of standards. So for example, you might only have 10 or 12 questions a student might have in a session. So these are not as in-depth as our NJSLA assessments. And they're not along those 5 categories. So a lot of you might be familiar with, meeting or exceeding expectations on that ranking of grades 1 through 5 or points 1 through 5. In Start Strong, there's 3. There's strong support they may need it, which is like the most supported child they need. some support may be needed and less support may be needed. So even though we're talking about the same kids, like a student who took 5th grade science and is now taking 6th grade science 4 months later, you're still not really comparing apples to apples because the levels are different. The categories of how students have done are different. However, we can talk about trends and what we're seeing across the board. So here are our ELA Start Strong scores. So I'm going to start off with Ms. Keisha Smith-Carrington, our humanities supervisor, to talk about overall trends across the grades.
So similar to what Dr. Tu has already shared, we do have a similar result this year when it comes to Start Strong. It's important to note that the students are being assessed on their readiness for the grade that they are currently in. So for example, a 4th grade student is being tested on their mastery of the 3rd grade standards. So this is giving us data that, again, aligns very closely to what we saw in the spring. So for all intents and purposes, there are no surprises. When we look across our data, we see that the majority of our students are in the less support may be needed category, which aligns with knowing that our students on the NJSLA data were mostly in the meeting or exceeding expectations. And as we look across the different support levels, we can see grade by grade. Again, those same patterns are the majority of our students in each grade are in less support may be needed, where most of the grade levels show a smaller amount of students who are either in the strong support may be needed or in the some support. And it depends on grade levels. You can see that there are some grade levels where it's relatively close with, for example, in across all grades, there's only a 1 percentage point difference, but it's really negligible when you look at the differences between most of the grades.
Thank you so much. I'll talk about 4th grade school scores across the district. So as mentioned previous, these scores are really similar to what we saw trending from the spring from NJSLA. A bulk majority of our students are in that less support needed across all 4 of our elementaries. So that trend continues across all 4 of the elementary schools. Really, our goal moving forward is to get those some support needed over to the less support needed, and then to help our strong support needed move forward with success. So again, those trends continue across all 4 elementaries where the bulk majority of our students are in that less support. For 5th grade, the trend is similar to 4th grade. Across all 4 elementaries, we have the bulk majority of our students in that less support needed category.
And as we start to look at our disaggregated data, we see again the same patterns. There's only a slight difference. I believe that if you look back on the NJSLA, you'll see that there were areas where Hispanic might have had a larger percentage who were in the lower 2 areas. Here, you can see the difference between our lower scoring subgroups being relatively similar, and really the only difference being in those lower 2 areas of strong support may be needed or some support may be needed. But for the most part, we see the same patterns. We know that we have areas of outcome that are racialized. Again, when we look at our male and female comparisons, similar to NJSLA, females perform stronger in English language arts on those results. And so we would expect to see a similar outcome here. And again, talking about some of our patterns, when we look across our subgroups, we do see the similarity of free and reduced lunch showing less students in the less support may be needed. And our ELL students and also our special education students reflect those same patterns, with our 504 and Gen Ed students showing stronger outcomes in the levels of support that, or the numbers of students rather, who are in the less support may be needed area. And so similar to what we'd spoken about before, we see that there are similar scores and trends when it comes to comparing these data results to the results that we looked at for the NJSLA. We see the majority of students in each grade, as Sarah talked about, for 4th and 5th. And as we saw on the slide for 6th through 9th, the majority of our students are in the less support needed category. And we know that our area of focus is targeting support for our students who represent either our marginalized groups in the district, either by race and ethnicity or by socioeconomic status or by level of ability.
Some next steps that we're looking at across early bands. We did do an Orton Gillingham training for educators across multiple tiered systems of support. So this fall, we actually received our Orton Gillingham School District-wide accreditation, which is something to really celebrate. We are one of 10 schools across the country to receive such an accreditation. So that just means that we've made a commitment to training our staff in the science of reading and structured literacy approaches to really help support our struggling readers as well as our high readers. We started with all of our interventionists this fall and then some strategic leaders across the district. And we even had 2 principals join in. This summer, we're going to be providing that 30-hour week-long training to all of our kindergarten and first grade teachers. If you're familiar with our early K-1-2 curriculum, we use Foundations to really help support phonics acquisition. This is going to give that really sort of a power boost. So we're not just focusing on phonics, we're going to bring in phonological awareness skills. And we know that when students get early exposure to phonological awareness in K and 1, by 3rd grade, their scores are much higher. We're looking at fluency, vocab, and then deep comprehension, work with those students through this training as well. So all of those teachers, we offer that training this summer to really help that tier 1 support. And as of today, we announced our new literacy benchmark. Previous, we had used DRA2. DRA2 retired as of this year. So we are moving forward. All of our teachers came together and voted, and we are using a DRA3 for next fall, which is the updated version. So there's some really nice components there that are going to help us get better metrics on our students across the board.
Okay, and in our secondary grade levels, we are going to be continuing the department wide professional learning on culturally sustaining literacy practices. And we actually were able to start that on the 5th of December. I'm very excited about our first session with Lorena Herman, looking at her textured teaching text, as well as other resources and strategies that she's sharing with us. In addition to that, we will be continuing to expand opportunities for professional collaboration across the content areas. So we are looking to strengthen horizontal and vertical articulation. Some of our sessions will include content focus, and some will include a humanities focus, so that our social studies and English educators will be learning together. We will also be focusing in that work on teaching to transfer and administering and analyzing common assessments. And these are a continuation of the work that we'd planned based on the earlier results shared with you this year.
Great. Thank you. All right, so unfortunately, Stephanie Tidwell, our supervisor of mathematics and business education, could not be here tonight. So I'm going to be in the driver's seat when we talk about our math scores. As we shared with ELA, our math Start Strong scores and science Start Strong scores are very similar to NJSLA. And I forgot to mention at the beginning of this presentation, if the community is interested in going back and looking at our October presentation, it is on our YouTube channel. It's recorded from the board meeting level, but it is also a PDF on our curriculum webpage under the PPS site. So if you go to curriculum, it's on the right-hand panel on the main page there. So these are the students across the board at the elementary level. In Algebra 2, we are at the majority of less support may be needed, and our scores mimic the Algebra 1 scores and geometry scores that we saw from the spring. As I shared in the NJSLA presentation, New Jersey has decided to change rules. So say that I was a 7th grade student taking Algebra 1, I would only take that Algebra 1 assessment and not grade 7 algebra, which we do not offer in Princeton. Now they want students to take the grade level assessment as well as that higher level course, so that we have a more accurate read of the grade level standards, as well as the course specific standards in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and in geometry. So you can kind of see across the board in some areas, we really do want to focus on strong support and really building those foundational math skills. So here it is by level. I do want to note Algebra 1 at the high school level looks very scary. So that's 37 students. So I just want to put that in context. Obviously, we care about those 37 students, but it's, it's a smaller population. So any score is going to look large on the graph. But for the most part, when you look across the board, this is where we are. And then when we get to like the Algebra 2s at the middle school, that's a bump because students are at an accelerated level there. And across the district overall, 52% of our students are meeting in the less support category. I'm gonna let Sarah do the elementary comparison.
Okay, so for fourth grade, I know you're going to get tired of hearing it, but it's similar to those NJSLA scores, which is good news, right? We really want to see consistent trends. As Dr. Tu mentioned, we have the 3 rather than 5 categories where they can score. So the good news is with our fourth graders, again, consistently across the district at each elementary, the majority of students are in the less support needed, that highest level 3, with some support and less support respective. So those trends maintain consistency across all 4 elementaries. And for 5th grade, we see that trend continue, that we're both majority in the less support needed across all 4 buildings and district-wide as we look at that.
Thank you. Okay, so here we have broken down by race and ethnicity. As what Keisha shared with ELA, our Black and Hispanic subgroup populations are needing more of the strong support. And these are conversations that we're having with our staff. And we also, when we get to it, our Ls, our free and reduced lunch population, and our special education population, how we're providing that targeted instruction that we know students need to be successful. Here in ELA, it was that the females did slightly better, and as the national trends, our males are doing slightly better, but they are very comparable for both ELA and for math across the genders. And here we are talking about our L population, our free and reduced population, and our special education population. So summary, we have similar scores and trends. Less support needed across elementary and Algebra 2, and that targeting instruction. In December, as Keisha shared, she was very excited to kick off PD. We kicked off math workshop professional development with Jennifer Lemp, who is the go-to person for providing differentiated instruction in elementary and middle school math classrooms, and really having flexible groupings and really meeting where students' needs are across the continuum. So if students are ready for a higher challenge, how do we provide math materials that support them? How are students who are on the grade level standards, how do we support them? And how are students who need a boost of those foundational math skills? What are opportunities to support them? And not tracking students within the classroom, but making sure that there's flexible grouping and providing assessments along the way so that we're really meeting students' needs. Another great resource that Stephanie Tidwell is doing with our secondary team is reading the book Building Thinking Classrooms, and really talking about collaboration in math, deep thinking in math. And, so often people see math as a solo sport, but when you get to these really higher levels in college and university levels, math is a discussion. Math is gray area. It's not always black and white. And so having kids think critically as they're going through proofs and problem sets and really engaging with the material is what we want them to be able to practice here in Princeton. We need to continue to do alignment with our math standards and look at how are we providing differentiated instruction to meet students' needs within the classroom, but also tier 2 supports like, AIS or Math Lab or programs such as Idea Center. How are we helping students get that boost? And one of the things that we have on our website is that we are looking, and we put out an RFP for a math and science program audit and evaluation. So our SAC team with some staff members are meeting with possible vendors later this week. And the good news is that we hope to have a successful winner, in quotes, on our January agenda to move forward and to do that work throughout our community. All right, on to science. Matt, is Dr. Joy Barnes-Johnson here? I can't see from my, because I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay. Hi, Joy.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. So The science results, again, parallel what we see, Start Strong data, parallel what we saw in other assessments throughout the year. Most notable, as has been mentioned, majority of our population are in the needs less support category across the board, and at every grade level. I think it's also notable that at the 12th grade level, these data are based on 48 students. So understand that we are going to take this as a sample, and it's not necessarily representative sample, but we're going to use that as a basis. So what you see is that we do actually have students that are performing at about the same level that we see in elementary science as we do in the ELA and in the math categories. You can advance. Again, the way that our performance is actually above the state performance level. And at each grade band, we have a significant population that is needing less support, except in the grade 9 science category. And so in general, though, I love to see science at all grades. You see this upward trend where we have the smallest number of students needing the most number or the most support, except in the grade 12 science category, which again is difficult because it's based on such a small population. As has been mentioned in the other categories, our Black and Latino populations are the populations needing the most support. And that carries on. If you advance, please. That carries on. You can advance, please. When we think about subgroups around free and reduced lunch, special ed designation, and our English language learners, these represent areas of significant growth that is needed in the work that we do to support students and educators. Can you advance, please? And so, in summary, I think it's important to show that we have very similar scores to our NJSLA, that we have a lot of our students who actually do not need significant amounts of support. Growth areas for us include the ability to read informational text. And so it's really exciting to hear Sarah and Keisha talk about the multidisciplinary efforts for culturally sustaining and integrated reading, because we certainly think that the blueprint for both NJSLA and Start Strong lend themselves well to reading and writing practices. So there we go. District-wide STEM literacy will look like reading informational text and writing for a wider swath of audience. We're also looking at improving students' opportunities to engage in daily STEM activity that's very pointed and narrowly focused on the blueprint. We want to increase the stakeholder buy-in for science assessment in general, so that by the 12th grade, we actually know or have a more clear picture of what our high school graduates know and are able to do in the scientific and technical areas. And we are, as Kim mentioning, going to undergo this math science alignment and program audit, which is very exciting because we'll get an outside perspective on where we are with that.
Thank you, Joy. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about our graduation proficiency assessment. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, it was a field test for our class of 2023. It will be new graduation assessment for our class of 2024 and beyond. The good news is that there are still alternate pathways to graduate, such as SAT, ACT, portfolio process. They're still tweaking some of those pieces, but there will still be alternative pathways to graduate if students are not successful at meeting the standards on this assessment. And what does it do? It assesses ELA, Algebra 1, and geometry standards in 4 90-minute units. Okay, so here is our district data. It's one slide. It's very exciting. Everything's all in one place. So you have not passing and passing. And so for ELA, 74% of our students, remember it was a field test last year, this did not count for them, passed the assessment compared to 39% at the state level. and 80% of our students passed the math assessment compared to 50% at the state level. So I do think that's much to be happy about. What I would love to know more of, as this is our baseline data, is historical trends for Princeton, right? So as we take the assessment this spring in March with our current juniors, how are they doing? Learning more about this assessment because it was new, it is field testing, it was in the field testing stages, as they said. So we don't really know as much about the assessment, except that we compare it to the old HESPA assessment. So I would just love to know more so that we can better meet our students' needs in English lab, math lab, within the classroom, in tiered support settings, so that we can get that success rate higher, that passing rate higher for our district. So you can see across the subgroups where we are. And so once again, we're seeing the same trends that we saw with Start Strong and with NJSLA, with our Black and Hispanic population. And then here's our achievement level for gender. And then the subgroup populations. Once again, I do think we have to put it in context. So this is one grade. How many of our Ls took it? So we could be talking about less than 10 students who might be at this level. So I just want to make sure that we put that in context. However, it is a trend that we have noticed across the assessment. So how are we providing more supports for our students or English language learners? And that doesn't just mean within the formal program, but how are we providing professional development for staff? How are we partnering, welcoming communities? How do we help provide supports in the native language or with translated materials or other things so that they can feel successful or be successful in our school district? All right, next steps. So the same strategies that we're utilizing to support students in for Start Strong, for NJSLA, will be utilized to help with the NJGPA. These are all sort of the same standards that we're measuring. It's just the standards are at different points. So, in 11th grade, they're doing Algebra 1 and Geometry, but they've done it already with Start Strong and NJSLA by the time they get to 11th grade. So it's reiterating and reemphasizing these core standards. So how do we make sure that we're incorporating them and providing kids opportunities to have practice with these standards and facility with them before they enter this entrance exit exam past our secondary level? We've also rebooted our INRS program, that's Intervention and Referral Services, to better identify students' needs and support within the classroom and outside of the classroom. It is not a fast track to an IEP. What this does is it makes sure that we provide tools, supports, and strategies for our staff, support the diverse needs of the students in front of them, and then also really be creative with a variety of programming and other ideas at the high school level, the middle school level, at the elementary level. That is to say, after we do data collection and we check in and see how some of these resources work, if the student is still not meeting success, then we talk about alternatives such as a 504 plan or an IEP to ensure that we meet the student's needs. But we really want to do a full diagnostic before we get there, because sometimes it's the programming that needs the support and the boosting and the resources to help our students be successful. All right, so any questions from the board?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tu, Dr. BJ, Keisha, and Sarah. Thank you very much for presenting that very sobering data. And I guess two things stuck out to me. One was the special ed, 73%, I guess was red, whatever that meant. Is that a significant portion? Like you said, the ELL could be 10 children. Do we know how many, is that significant?
So you have to go across the grade level, right? So you'd have to look at the count of students and estimate an average district is about 15% with IEP. So then you have to calculate that. So you're looking at about maybe 30 students, maybe 40 students.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's still terrible. Okay.
Exactly. Like, we're not making excuses, but you have to kind of put it in context for the sample that you have, right? But you have to also say to ourselves, what are the trends that we're seeing? What are the subgroups that keep popping up that we need to make sure that how are we meeting their needs? How are we providing the supports and services to help them? And also the students who are excelling, how do we keep pushing them forward as well?
Okay, thanks. Michelle.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for the presentation. One of the things I like to say, so I've been living in this town over 30 years, and we could go back 20 years, and I saw the same presentation. And so my question is, do we know of any similar community in the United States, a college town, a town that has the same, similar demographics, socioeconomic profile, that has actually managed to raise the score and achievement of the students with IEPs, English language learners, students from a Latino background, Black students? Because I guess, you know, and I know you guys know this, and I know that it's not for lack of trying in this town. So my question is, do you know of any community that has successfully figured this out? Because I look at every year, I hear, you know, the things that we do and they don't work. So my question is there anybody who's doing it right, or is this still the mystery that no one's been able to solve?
I think there's never a magic wand, right? However, I will say this, and Sarah talked about it a little bit tonight. When you look at our draft of strategic plan, one of the goals is to focus on early education, age 3 to grade 3. If you can catch a student's learning disabilities or gaps by 2nd grade, you can close 86% of the gap. The key is early intervention. Now, some students move to our district later and so forth and so on, and then we can provide supports. The other thing that really is helpful is that about 95% of students require explicit reading instruction, explicit phonological, phonemic, and phonic awareness. And with this Orton-Gillingham model, teaching students to have this explicit blending and rights, kids are learning to read and then they read to learn. If they do not have those foundational skills, they can't access math, they can't access science, because they can't read through the word problems or they're getting tripped up. So we have to go back and look at how are we providing services. And Sarah, in my previous district, we had 90% of students after the pandemic on reading level, meeting and exceeding expectations, with having explicit reading instruction every day for a 30-minute structured literacy block. Now, that district's demographics were not exactly Princeton's, but it was another Mercer County school district who was suffering from the pandemic and had gaps in reading instruction. So I think that's helpful. And Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. You know, what you're saying really resonates, right? Like, what is the answer to move the needle forward? And Dr. Tu is so correct. I can say with full conviction that anything I would bring here is what I would want my own children to have, right? I always think about that in that perspective of what would I want my own children to have in terms of educational acquisition. So the dyslexia screener we're bringing in, the early literacy screener that can give us those red flags in kindergarten, that's out of Harvard and Boston Children's Hospital, and that's coming to us this spring for the first time. So we can catch children before those deficits ever even arise. They're on our radar to provide intervention to. The type of program that we're bringing in, as Dr. Chu mentioned, we had 90% of kids reading on grade level by the end of K, and we started off with 46% of them. So really, really big jumps. When we talk about math and programming for that tier 2, where those children need extra support, there really hadn't been a specific program that we were using or training. So we brought in Bridges intervention for math. That training was really rigorous, and our interventionists said that it was fantastic and they're using it, and kids are already benefiting tremendously from it. So I think we're making some good headway in terms of tier 1 and tier 2 interventions to really help support those students that are struggling a little bit more.
What about the ones who are in 5th grade or 7th grade or 9th grade? Is there an answer for that?
I think what research will say is you don't want to pull them from your academic set. I could do a dissertation on this, Michelle. So we'll have to talk maybe in SAC more about this. We could talk for hours. But I think it's the balance of being with your social peers and then being pulled out of programming to get that targeted instruction support and finding that balance and making sure that you have, it's called a formal tier 2 programming. So that's something that, you know, as we talk about the budget for next year, what are some key positions that could be really beneficial and fruitful, as well as additional ESL instructors to provide the support and targeted instruction so that they can not only do a pull-out model where they're doing the 60 minutes every day of English instruction, but getting into the science and math classrooms, getting into the social studies classrooms, and helping support in a co-teaching model the students in those classes as well, so that there's a transfer of language acquisition within there. So there are successful models, but as I said, there's no full magic wand. And especially in the secondary level, if you have a student coming in who has limited or limited formal education, as they call it, or limited or interrupted formal education, a SLAIF, you know, we're really racing against the clock to help these kids graduate. And so how do we tailor a schedule to meet their needs, but also give them that social and emotional support as well, to feel like part of our high school community. So these are not easy solutions. And I think sometimes each student it's a uniquely tailored program and plan to fit them. And I think that's also part of the strategic plan draft. But it's a whole team effort for sure. And it's aligning our systems so that, you know, a student is getting the same type of language and expectations in the classroom and then in their pullout setting than if they have an IEP, so that there's common goals and expectations across the district.
Thank you.
Brian?
Sure. First, I want to also offer my thanks for the presentation, and extra thanks to Michelle for asking many of my questions much more eloquently than I would have. So I'll just limit it to one question, which is many of you are new in your roles and are going to be working diligently to make sure that we make progress, to find maybe not the magic wand, but some of the secret golden thread that can help make us better. What data will you be looking at? What data should the board be looking at to know if we're making progress?
It's a great question, Brian. I think as we shared in October, I think these standardized assessments are the new baseline, right? We can't always compare back to 2017 and 18. We have to sort of compare ourselves as now. So we have this last round from last spring. We have this one in mathematics. Stephanie Tidwell has implemented Linkit assessments, which are standardized assessments that are taken 3 times throughout the year in our math classes from the elementary to the secondary level, that students kind of grow throughout the year, and that should be tracking that data. So we can talk about that at SAC and in committee. We have, as Sarah said, our dyslexia screener the new one that we're implementing. We have our DRAs, that's our reading assessments that we want to communicate out to the community and share with families where their students are, so that families are an active part. I think we're missing that piece, that they're a partner in these conversations as well. Keisha has implemented programming such as Common Lit that also has some common experiences for students. We want, how do I put this? We don't want everybody lockstep, but how do we provide common touchstones throughout the curriculum that sort of serve as a pause point and say, where are we? How are kids doing? And then really like funneling it down and saying, you know, here are trends across the grade, this class, and then how is Kim doing, or how is that student doing in the curriculum? So we have the assessments, we're aligning them. And I think that's what's helpful about being a new team. As you mentioned, we're not tied to anything. So we're working together to sort of navigate, you know, how are we building this from the ground up? What's worked in other school districts? And how do we fit Princeton's needs?
Thank you.
Jean?
Also echoing many thanks, really enjoyed the presentation. Could I ask if we do track data for students who began in our district versus those who enter midway, which I heard you already give reference to? And then in terms of individual growth of the student, you know, we've been talking about that since I became a board member. Is there a way for us to track that yet? Or is that something that you're designing? You just referenced it in your last answer. And last question, is this only given in English? Is that perhaps it's given in Spanish as well? Okay, thanks.
Yes. And something that should be pointed out, if a student is here for 1 year or more and is an English language learner, they have to take the assessment. They are not excused from the assessment. They have to sit for it. So that's a little bit frustrating as well. I can imagine moving to another country and not speaking the language and saying, okay, take a standardized assessment on science standards that you weren't maybe here for. But it's a barometer and it helps us gauge. We do not have a template for that individualized learning piece. What other districts tend to do and best practices, you take snippets and you kind of pull student X, student Y, student Z, and you kind of look across the board. However, as I was talking about, part of the strategic plan Andrea, is as students, especially entering into the high school, looking at their assessment profile, which is all in PowerSchool. It's all there for each individual student, and saying, you know, how are you doing? Are you on track to graduate? What else do you need? What other supports can you be in place? And just being more intentional with the data that we have. So there's no formal report, but everything is there historically in PowerSchool that counselors can use, case managers use, admin teachers can use to sort of help come around a child and provide them with the programming that they need.
Right. And are we able to track kids who just entered the district versus those who have started, pre-K all the way through?
Yeah, so Priscilla, especially with ESL, has done a lot of that. So, we look at, let's just say, our 120 Ls across the district, our English language learners, and then she says, well, they've been here for 5 years, they've been here for 1 year, they've had limited or interrupted formal education, and kind of go from that. I have not run a report on recent move-ins in general. That is something I can talk to Brian Aschenfelter, our data coordinator, about, to see, how we can do different pools of data that way. It's not one of our formally reported subgroups to the state, so it's not naturally broken down that way, but let's see what PowerSchool can do for us.
Thanks.
Mr. Christopher.
Dr. Tu, thanks so much, and I'll be quick. From a state standpoint, obviously, it's lots of data, but it's still technically a sample size of one test in 1 year, right? As a graduation requirement, looking at the results across the state, obviously there's a reason they decided this was going to be a pilot program and not an effective measure. Is there surround sound about what those changes will be? Is there, the possibility that next year is also going to be, a test, not an actual assessment?
That's a great question. All we've heard is that it's happening in March. It's been very quiet. And even with Start Strong, when we didn't know if it was going to happen a second year or not, we really didn't start getting communication until late summer that it was happening. And all of a sudden it was saying this, send this out to your community. It has to be done sometime in September. It's very disruptive, and not that I appreciate understanding where students are, but I think we also have internal assessments that we could utilize, as well as the NJSLA, to say we're growth, because as you heard tonight, we felt like broken records. Well, it's very similar to NJSLA. It's very, so if it's so similar, because there's only been 4 months between the testing sessions, wouldn't it be better to track spring to spring and go forward from there, and have a lot less interruption and stress on students and staff as we try to build community and start the school year, is what I would argue. And though, however, I feel like the same thing's going to happen with the NJ GPA. We'll probably hear much more in the month leading up to it. But as of now, it's been very quiet. And I believe for the NJ SLA, correct me if I'm wrong, Joy, we've been chosen to field test an additional assessment this year. So every year, 50% of districts in New Jersey get selected to field test new questions for the NJSLA. It's our turn this year. So that means our students will have an extra day of testing to test the test. Yes.
Well, on that note, thank you very much. Is any other questions? No, well, thank you. We're very fortunate to have Kim, you and your team here. And we know you've all inherited a lot of this, and we're looking forward to the great things you're going to do for our district. So thank you, and happy holidays to everyone that if we don't see you. And great job with the presentation. And if it's okay, I will move on now to the student. So we have the revised calendar. That's just for notice. We're going to revise that, Dr. Kelly. And we'll bring that back in January with some changes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
I think Betsy, do you have a question, Betsy?
I just had a question. Are we looking to get input from the community? And if so, on the calendars? And if so, where should they submit that feedback? And I also want to thank you for putting out a calendar through 2025. It's really helpful to families to be looking that far ahead.
Sure. And we try to do the rolling every 2 years. So next year we'll do the same thing. So there may be some revisions to the SY25. I think we could have them send the I'll work with, a lot of people aren't feeling well, so I will say Elizabeth included, but eventually when Elizabeth is back, I will work with her and perhaps we could send out communication to the community with our email address that we typically use to receive feedback.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Right, and there'll be some changes from what's on what's on tonight, right? So when we send it out, we're, okay, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Brian?
Sure. I guess my question has to do with the start of the school year. A few years ago, there was a lot of energy around trying to start a week earlier, in the last week of August. And the reason we couldn't do that was because of the summer referendum projects. And so I'm curious whether there's still interest in starting a week earlier. We've heard at the high school that concluding a week earlier would be much more productive given all of the conclusion of the standardized tests. We've heard from members of the community, for example, our university faculty and staff, that they now start earlier and they would welcome the opportunity to have their kids in school. So I'm just curious where our thinking stands with respect to what had been, to me, it seemed like we were going to move earlier, and now we are pretty much staying the way we have.
So we are doing construction again this upcoming summer for those places that we didn't do the roofs. However, I would say that could be, if the board would like, another question that we can ask the community from the staff. They're, there's no interest. I'll just be frank. But we could definitely ask that question with the community, like what the thoughts are. I have not heard anyone outside of, at the board meetings, members of the board. But there might be the community interest in that.
Well, if I could just add, so the teachers are starting now the last week of August, which is kind of new. And I think even the new teacher orientation now starts a week before that. So we are moving things back. And as you know, Brian, we did negotiate in the contract that there would be some flexibility. So like one of the things it is allowing is school, like this year, if there's no snow days, we're out on June 14th, which is extremely early. So while we're not starting, we're not starting school August 15th, I totally agree with Dr. Kelly. I don't think, because the teachers would have to come back in July, basically. So I don't see that happening, but if we can keep the momentum and end school, by that middle of June, I think that's a big step, because before we were ending very close to the end of June in many times. So there's been some progress.
I think this year, we are ending a little bit later this year. I think next year is
No, June 14th.
This year?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, June, if there's no snow days, so let's do our dance.
Okay, we'll do the dance.
I think June 15th, just FYI.
It's June 15th?
I think
Is it?
just in case
Okay.
they're
Never mind.
out there banking on June 14th.
Very, very early this year. June
Doing
15th.
PD, it's early this year.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so with that, I will move on to the student board members report with Rohan and Andre. And thank you so much for your patience. And of course, we were going to get you in before our break. So please take it away.
All right, so we made a presentation for today. Let me see if I can share screen. Oh, it's saying something about my security.
Matt, are you able to allow Andre and Rohan
It's
to share
saying
their
like, but I think it might be. Wait, Rohan, can you just share it?
Yeah, I
mine's
can
not
share.
working.
Yeah, I can share my screen.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Is it visible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So this is our report. And we sent out a survey to the student body to collect like some qualitative data about students' opinions, and we sort of synthesized it in this survey.
Oh, sorry, I was the one clicking the slides. All right, so a few key themes that we found from all of the responses were about mental health, about equity in the classroom, and about comments about school operations. And we're going to go into each of these specific themes and possible solutions in the presentation. So first,
So our first theme was mental health.
So a few, I guess, quotes from responses from the students in our surveys. We're talking about how a lot of students are getting blamed for not reaching out to their counselors and not bettering their mental health. And a lot of teachers don't see mental health as a valid reason for underperforming in class, and put a lot of blame on students for not taking action and trying to go see counselors to help them with their situation.
Yeah. And then also students also said that like just like as part of being a teen is very stressful, and like I think every student is dealing with their own issues, and so just having some more having the teachers and staff of the school just having, I think, more empathy for students is what they're asking for.
And some of our proposed solutions for these, a major one would definitely be equipping our teachers with like more information about mental health issues and resources, because we feel that teachers are not really knowledgeable about what students like need, and can't really direct them to what they could like different resources even in our school that they can use, and many students are not really knowledgeable about it as well. So we feel that teachers could best get this information out to the students.
A second solution is that we thought would be important was increasing the visibility of the mental health resources that our district has. And Rohan and I already talked with Dr. Kelly about putting together a resource with consulting with the guidance department at the school, and sort of sending that out to students in a way in which they're able to quickly understand what resources our school has to offer, because currently students don't really know what our school is doing for them to promote better mental health for students.
Yeah, we definitely feel that using like social media or even teachers' speeches at the start of classes are more accessible forms of communication to students as opposed to like a mass email or something like that. Now on to equity, and some examples of what students were talking about equity is first about the competitiveness. I feel a lot of the students are talking about how every single aspect of PHS has become competitive through both the college admissions process, just classes in general, and yeah.
Yeah, and then what goes hand in hand with that is a significant resource disparity at our school with kids who are able to afford like private tutoring or being able to participate in expensive extracurriculars. It sort of just like creates almost a duality among students that students really notice.
Some of our proposed solutions, again, a big, I guess, theme in our presentation is just communicating better to the students about what resources, especially through the Idea Center and the free tutors we have there, and testing waivers that are available to them. And we would also want to increase the amount of outreaches into local community about like starting the college process early and preparing these kids for success post high school.
And then also looking into providing more avenues of like funding or scholarships so that students, especially low income students and middle income students, are able to afford being able to participate in the same extracurriculars as wealthier students.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine.
My bad. Sorry. And then on to our final point, which was school operations. There were a few comments that we had in different areas. So first on school lunches, a lot of students were talking about how they could not even access lunch anymore because a lot of the wait times are so long. And if they rush from class, there's only about 10 to 15 minutes to actually eat and have a break from the very strenuous schedule that the school has.
And then I know that we got an update from the board about the Wi-Fi situation, but just continue to monitor that as well. Students still seem to really be stressed about the Wi-Fi at the school, and it is like sort of impeding on their the ability for them to complete academic activities.
Yeah, and we did hear from the board that they are working on this, and that a major problem is that kids are using the guest network, but we'll definitely try to talk to more students about whether there's problems with both the guest and the Princeton schools network, and if this is still a problem. And we do know that there's further investment going into this, so that I guess the board is already working on this. But yeah, and then finally, in terms of communication, a lot of students complained about a lack of transparency from the leaders, not only from I guess the board administration, but also even from the student council to know about what is being changed. There's no real way for students to even have an idea of what's being changed, even in regards to mental health, but also in terms of just overall resources in our school. That a lot of students aren't in the know, and they want to have a say in they want to have a say in what is happening. So and they feel so they really want to know what's going on. We feel we can solve this by maybe bring some sort of newsletter or some sort of consistent form that with what's going on in the school at that point.
Yeah, again, obviously some of these are the first solution that we had was about just maybe serving food during more times in the day so that students feel like if students feel like they're able to get food during their free period, for example, that will mean there's less pressure during that lunch period, as well as improving the efficiency of the serving process during lunch, in terms of the way the lines are being operated, and in terms of students paying for lunch. It just seems like it's working pretty inefficiently right now.
Yeah, and then this is I was continually looking for feasible ways to improve the network, but we do know that the board is actually working in the next few years to better the Wi-Fi. So I guess this is being solved in status quo, but we'll definitely continue to update you on what the students are saying on this problem. And then, finally, we I can talk about it. We just want to communicate, as we were saying, more frequently with the student body about planning and policy change in the school, and try to include diverse groups of students in planning. Andre, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is just the final our final thoughts. Just we think that a lot of these issues can really be addressed in the short term, some of them more in the long term, and also for the longer term solutions, really looking at getting students feedback. This feedback from the students, we think can really help in shaping where you guys want to allocate resources and look into addressing issues. And then also students really wanted more transparency from the board. And so the board and the leadership of the district in general. So just focusing on ways that we can increase communication with students so they feel like they're being involved.
Yeah, and we would be happy to maybe do some sort of consistent information. Sorry, I'm not able to find the right word, but a way in which we can communicate to students what's going on. If there's certain critical policy change that the board is making or student council, that we'll try to communicate that to the students.
All right. Are you're all good?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. We know you have a lot going on. We appreciate the time you took to survey your peers and put together that very impressive presentation. And you'll send that to us so that we can spend some time looking it over. The issues you raised are very important, and some things can't wait years, and we will get to work on what we can get to work on. The one thing is on communication, and we hear that from all the stakeholders that we need to communicate better. And if we can't communicate with our own peers, well, how do we communicate with your peers well? So do you have any suggestions on how we can be better communicators?
Well, I would say that if, say you had a list of certain like changes that were going on, I think that if you allowed like the liaisons, I feel like we could maybe better understand how the students would like be more receptive to information. So maybe if you send that to us, we could try to form like make an infographic or some sort of way to get it out to the students.
Okay.
Maybe through
Well,
social media or something like that.
Yeah, we commit to being better communicators with you. And then so that the students feel like they have more information. And if there's things we can do better, well, it'll be a trial and error. You let us know, but look for weekly emails.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Real quick, because I know we're supposed to take a break. My question is about the lack of equity that you articulated in the classroom, and about the expectation in certain classes that students have access to tutors. What do you find that in certain disciplines more than others? More in math classes, more in science classes? Like where is that? I mean, we all know it happens, but you know, my question is, from your perspective, where do you see it happening the most?
I think definitely more in like math and science classes than humanities classes. Like I think often some of the STEM teachers will just say like, if you're not getting it in this amount of time, just like hire a tutor, but then the tutor costs hundreds of dollars. So then students are kind of in a bind.
But the Idea Center at our school does actually give free tutors for students, but I think a lot of students don't know about that. So I think a big problem in our school is definitely just student knowledge about what is being offered to them.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. My second question, real quick, is around extracurriculars and the expense of them, and the expense of class trips. Do you guys have any specific feedback on that as well? You talked about scholarships. There's financial aid available to any student who can't afford to go on a trip. Do students know that?
I feel like it's not communicated that well to students, or it's also just seen as a lot of students see that an activity is expensive and just say like, oh, I'm not going to do that activity because it's too expensive, and don't really have knowledge like, oh, maybe I can get a scholarship to go on this trip or participate in this thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's helpful. Appreciate it. And thanks for the presentation, and thanks for being so honest. Thank you.
Of course.
Debbie?
Yes, fabulous presentation. And I do love how honest you guys are, and that's great. But my question to you is, we can send you an email, and then are you going to post it on Facebook? Like, how do we get this stuff out? Because I sit in many, many meetings, and I'm like, these are all the people that can help, and these are all the resources we have for mental health. But how do we get it into your friends, your peers' cell phone? I mean, because I can give you a list, but how do we tell them all? Because there are so many resources, and I think it's a whole, supply of what we have, but we need to get it to who needs, the demand of who needs it. But you really need to share how, because we have these board meetings, we talk about it, but I really want to know the nuts and bolts of doing it. You don't have to tell me right now, but I'm going to follow up with you guys, because I really think that is the whole communication. We really need to know how to do it with you guys and everything. But thank you for all this, and I will be in touch.
For sure. And I guess as Dr. Tu just posted as well in the chat, a lot of the student councils most students in the school do follow his Instagram, so we feel that we could utilize those accounts to publish like short and concise infographics that are easy to interpret. And also, after the recent incident that happened this past few months, there was a speech given to all the teachers to give at the start of class, which most students at least were somewhat exposed to and listened to. So, but we'll definitely get back to you about.
Okay, great. So we can work together. Thank you.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you.
And I echo the thanks of my colleagues. You two are extraordinary. And we really heard in that presentation, not only you presenting to us some of the very same questions we grapple with, but you brought solutions. That's not something all adults do, is bring solutions to the problems that they identify. So we really, really appreciate your willingness to work with us. Just two things you mentioned about articulating to students what mental health resources are there, articulating to students about things like free tutoring and other resources. We've been talking about doing that for your parents as well. So I think that the entire community could really benefit from having this information at our fingertips. And maybe we're going to get to you all in a different manner than we get to the adults in the community. But if we work together, I think we can do it. Thanks so much. I hope you both relax and enjoy a wonderful break. Thanks for all that you do for the students.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. And we're going to move now. We do have to go to closed session, but we are going to do our first public comment. So this is a public comment on agenda items and non-agenda items. And if you'd like to speak for 3 minutes or so about any topic, please just raise your virtual hand and Mr. Bolden will call on you.
Jen Bigioni.
Hi, I'm Jen Bigioni. I'm the librarian at the high school. I have a question about some of the statistics that we saw tonight. And I know that you can't answer me directly necessarily, but if we have statistics on who opted out of the tests and how that might be skewing some of our results one way or the other. And then the other is the overlap of students who might be in multiple categories, so that we're not looking at each student as a discrete object, but as you know, a whole person who might be in multiple categories, and getting a sense of what the real number is if a student is in 2 or 3 different categories. So that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we know, Dr. Tu, what % did kids opt out?
As Joy mentioned, it was mainly our seniors. So
Okay.
in the grids, and I forgot to mention too, I'm so glad this came up. This will be posted on the website tomorrow for access to the entire community. But when you look at the grids, it will have test count, and that's the amount of students. So the only one that were really low were Algebra 1 at the high school because of the amount of students who were taking Algebra 1, and the senior science were huge opt out. That was the big one. Other than that, we have over 200 counts of students. I do think Jen brings up a good point about a student being in multiple subgroups. You know, that they, they might be L and free and reduced lunch and special ed, like that is fully possible. We don't have, I would say a lot of times it might be 2 subgroups, maybe not 3, but those are pieces of data that we talk as an admin team about and try to find those trends.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tu.
Jessica Vieira.
Hi there. Thank you so much for taking my comments. I just wanted to very quickly ask that you share the email address for the comments on the calendar. And also, as was mentioned, I very much appreciate the 2-year rolling projection for the calendar. But I would love to see that it actually gets finalized. I think last year there was a lot of confusion about the first day of school being moved because the calendar was actually, I don't think actually ever officially finalized. So if we could do that for the community, I think it would be great. Many people I know this past year, including us, had planned our first day of school to be Thursday, and then it was moved to Tuesday. And that actually caused a lot of havoc for a lot of people. So if we could just get something finalized and have it published as final, that would be great. Lastly, also I think the kids' presentation was amazing. My daughter happens to be listening and agrees with everything that was said. And also, if we could avoid using social media as the way to publish the information to the students, I would appreciate it, because I don't want my kids on social media, and that shouldn't be the way that they get the information. So if we can try to avoid that as much as possible, that would be great. Thanks again, and appreciate all the hard work.
Thanks, Jessica. All right, Mr. Bolden, do we have anyone else?
There are no other questions at this time.
Okay, so again, we're going to go into closed session in 1 minute. We're going to be in closed session for I would think 30 minutes to an hour, and then we will come back and resume our meeting. So with that, can I get a motion to go into closed session, please? Rob, second Brian, Mr. Bolden. I think you have a statement.
Resolved that the Board of Education approve the closed session resolution, whereas NJSA 10412 allows for a public body to go into closed session during a public meeting. And whereas the Board of Education for the Princeton Public Schools has deemed it necessary to go into closed session to discuss certain matters which are exempted from the public, and whereas the minutes of the closed session will be released when the need for confidentiality in accordance with NJSA 10412 no longer applies, and whereas the regular meeting of this Board of Education will reconvene at the conclusion of closed session this evening. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Princeton Public Schools will go into closed session for the HIB appeal in accordance with NJSA 10412. We'll just take a quick vote. Is everyone unanimous on that?
Can we show hands?
See unanimity.
Okay. And so we hope members of the public will stay on. If not, best wishes for happy holidays, a happy new year. And our reorganization meeting is January 3rd at 6 p.m. in person at Valley Road. So we hope to see you then, or in an hour. All right, we're adjourned, Mr. Bolden.
Yeah, everyone should have the link to the closed session.
Started. So the next item, perfect timing. The next item is item I, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. This is part of the consent agenda, and we'll move on to board committee reports. Do we just want to email or post the board committee reports on the website? Yep. Okay. Item K, second reading, the HIB policy, and then I'm going to move on to the personnel agenda, and just stop me if you want to say anything. So L1 resignations, L2 newly created positions, L3 appointments, L4 retirement, L5 transfer reassignment, L6 leave of absence, L7 substitute teacher, L8 personnel item, L9 student services, L10 curriculum and instruction, L11 athletic EPES 22-23. Then M1 curriculum and instruction, grant application, acceptance society for science STEM. Why is this not coming up here? Hold on. There it is, the STEM grant. So the district has been awarded $5,000 for the 22-23 school year by the Society for Science STEM Research Grants. And the grant will support Mark Eastburn to engage students in authentic scientific research. And we are very grateful and acknowledge the contribution. M2, salary authorizations. M3, adoption of pre-K 12, pre-K through 12 curriculum. M4, PHS program of studies. M5, textbook approval.
That's an action item.
Oh, that's an action item, the PH, okay. So can I get a motion for that PHS program of studies? Betsy, second. Brian. Okay, any discussion? No, I had a question. Dr. Tu, I saw that Mindful Mentors was being removed. And I was just wondering, is that because we don't have faculty to run that, or was there no interest?
I believe it was a mixture of both, as well as the, I was sad to see the Teachers of Tomorrow, or whatever that course was, that it was due to lack of interest and enrollment.
Okay, because this was previously the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program. And my son participated in it, and actually was very meaningful. So, all right. Okay, so Mr. Bolden, do you want to call the roll?
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
Yes.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Jean Durbin,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Ryan McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yeah.
Rob Christopher.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, M5, textbook approval. M6, purchase of textbook and related materials. M7, is this an action item?
No.
And I would like for it to be an action item, also M8, please.
Okay, can I get a motion? Rob, second, Betsy.
Daphne Kendall.
Yes,
Wait, can we have discussion?
sure.
Okay, so I'm flagging this again, and it is particularly important because of what our student representative said tonight. They talked about how kids or students don't participate in extracurricular activities because of the expense. This actually happens to be one where there's been a significant effort to fundraise and to use prize money to keep the price low. The problem with that approach is that at the beginning of the school year, the students don't know that the price, which is $850 to go on this ethics bowl, is going to be available to them. So many students will not participate in this or other extracurricular activities offered in our school district because of the cost. And so I just think it's really important. I'm going to vote against it, not because I think there's anything wrong with the ethics bowl. I'm going to vote against it because we really need to change how we present extracurricular activities, and we really need to be more sensitive about the expense, because kids will just not participate. And so it ends up being inequitable, and extracurriculars make such a big difference in a student's life and academic experience. So I just want to say that we can't continue running our extracurricular activities with these kinds of expenses until we figure out a way to support or to fundraise so that students know when they sign up that there will be a way financially for them to be able to attend. So now you can vote.
Well, no, Rob and Betsy have their hands up. So Rob?
So while I hear that the cost is certainly a concern, I think the issue, as often, right, is communication. I'm hearing, and I've heard since I joined this board almost a year ago, this has come up a couple of times. And I think the concept that basically no student will get turned away for cost is important. I think they need to understand that, and we do need. I understand also that there comes a stigma with that, and we need to make sure that we're sensitively communicating it and offering it. Right. I think that's without question. I think where you run into an issue with where is that line? Is 850 is a lot? I'm sure 150 is a lot for some folks. I'm sure 50 is a lot for some folks. So where do we draw that line? Is the answer getting rid of extracurriculars across the board? I can't imagine that's kind of what we want to do as a district. So I think the communication of the scholarship / funding opportunities is the answer here. I certainly don't want to see all of the kids at the high school or at any level miss out on opportunities because of that.
And I'll just jump in and say we're working on a policy to streamline and make very consistent the way students and families are asked for funding in this district. And I would just love to throw out the idea, because I feel very strongly about this, and Michelle, I know you feel very strongly about this, and I actually believe we're the board that can help the district move this forward. So I just wanted to put out the suggestion that in the new year, if Dr. Kelly and Dr. Tu are in favor of this, that we convene some kind of committee, maybe an ad hoc committee of the board or a committee that Dr. Kelly puts together that includes students, teachers, or a representative, students, teachers, parents, administrators, and board representation, just to see, let's figure out if we can figure out how to do this the right way, because I actually think this community, we can solve that.
So, and I actually think it's much easier. And I think it goes back to what the student board rep said, which is communication. And one of the things they said that I don't know if everyone else got was the funding for tests, right? Now, we have said, so we're blue in the face, that put on those AP tests, put on this test. If you can't afford it, please see your counselor. There's blah, blah, blah. It doesn't happen, right? So is the answer not to let every child take an AP test because for some reason people can't follow our directives. So, I mean, I really do think communication is a big part of this. And I just think the answer is not to take it away. But Michelle, I respect what I respect what you're saying, but I would like some solutions. Like, what is an option? What is something we can do besides not going on these trips?
I'm happy to have that conversation, but you know, again, this has been a 5-year journey to get us to this point where we're even talking about, hey, let's see if we can find a solution.
No, we set up the
talking
equity
about
fund many years ago for the same reason, because we didn't want people, it's just, you know.
But again, the barriers to utilizing that fund, you know, still remain. And again, I'm not suggesting that we're not well-intentioned. Right, I'm not suggesting that we're not well-intentioned, and I'm not suggesting that we don't try. What I'm saying is that it's not effective, and we need to look at different ways, whether it's more communication, whether it's required fundraising, whatever it is. But as our students told us tonight, that message is clearly not getting through.
That was about tutors, I thought, and they were talking
No,
about.
that was also about extracurriculars too.
In the
Look at the
community,
text.
like travel sports, etc. They weren't talking about school functions. They were talking
Yeah, they
about
were.
tutors and extracurricular things that are expensive in the community. That's what I
They
heard.
were.
I could be wrong, Michelle,
Well,
but
circle back
anyway,
and ask.
yeah, I think that would be a great idea. And then the other thing I was thinking is maybe they could, when they do a survey, maybe they could get a question in there. Did you know that no student is turned away from participation in extracurricular and activities and trips? Maybe they could put that in there to help sort of get the message out a little better. Just a thought.
Thank you, Jean, because it is board policy. So if people are being turned away, that's a violation of board policy.
I think it's more that the students think that there's not a chance, or they don't want to go to their parents yet again and say this costs more money. I think it's more complex than we've been treating it. And so I'm happy to serve on a committee and talk about it. Because I think that we're so many of our students are deprived of opportunities to participate in extracurriculars. It's disgraceful. So I'm gonna vote no.
Deb?
Yeah, so Michelle, we have been talking about this for years, which is why we started the equity fund. And what's also disappointing is, you know, prior to COVID and because of so many changes, things have not been passed down. But like Susan said in SAC the other day, the Princeton Children's Fund, which Daphne and I both founded, has money. And so I used to work with Lenora all the time to pay for so many things, as you know, just writing the checks and everything. So there's a lot that's been lost, and it's not even just the trips, like something like this, you need clothing. And I know years ago, the middle school had like a room of, I can't remember the name, that would have clothes in it for kids that they could just borrow or have, you know, or for concerts, you know, just if you have extra ties, you drop them off and the kids can get them. So it's more than just the money, but it's also, we have talked about this, and I'm not really sure where the shoe has fallen, but I would love to be part of the discussion. But again, some of these things, they start earlier, you know, they start in middle school, and the whole music program, it starts in elementary school. And that's why we have the after school music program to help those kids, to kind of like a tutoring thing. But we have to decide if that's something we want to do, because we have talked about it. And it's frustrating, you know, that you bring it up all the time and you just say, oh, no one's doing anything and that and that. But it's because
that's not what I say. That's not what I say. I'm not saying we don't do anything. What I'm saying is that we're not doing the right things that really impact kids and really impact families. So no, I would never say we don't do anything, and I would never say we're not well-intentioned. What I'm saying is that we're not effective at it.
Okay. And the kids, Jean, they did mention they weren't aware of scholarships and stuff that they said they weren't aware. So we have to figure out how to let them, but it shouldn't just be the students too. I mean, I think guidance needs to come the other way, and then they can meet in the middle with all this stuff.
All right. Anyone else on this issue? No? Okay. So, Mr. Bolden?
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
No.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Jean Durbin,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Rob Christopher.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to item N1, professional consulting services.
No, I'm sorry, I asked for item M8, student.
I thought we
day
voted on
field
both
trip.
of them.
No, 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 because the student day field trips is something that happens during the school day, which costs parents $350 for their kids to go see Hamilton and go to Hershey Park. Those are the two trips that are planned for the 8th grade.
Yes,
Again,
and I commend the 8th grade.
Are we discussing this? Do we have a motion?
Oh, yeah. Can I get a motion? I'm sorry, I thought we did 7 and 8 at the same time. Betsy, next, Beth, let's discuss.
So we have a school trip, these two school trips, which are after 2 years of these kids pretty much missing middle school, is great. I'm not criticizing the attempt to really give them a great experience at the end of the year. And there used to be a trip to Washington. So the cost of these two trips is $350. Again, we say, if you cannot afford it, we have a fund there's a line in our budget that will pay for some students to be able to go. My point is that we've picked the students on free and reduced lunches. Great. More than likely they can't afford the $350. But I believe that there are probably other students and other families that can't afford the $350. And we make these assumptions that because people live in Princeton and they're not visibly low income, or that they always have the means to pay for these trips. And I just think that something that happens during the school day, if we're going to offer a trip, it should be at no expense or minimal expense, or the kids should have an opportunity to fundraise so that parents aren't saddled with this $350 obligation to make so that their child can participate in something that's planned by the school that's going to happen during the school day. It's again, my concern is not that we're doing something, that we don't care. It is we're ineffective, and there will be children who sit at home because their parents can't afford it, or the kids will never tell their parents that the trip is $350.
So part of the exciting part of the student achievement discussion about this is that we suggested, and I think they were really amenable to it, that we not just focus on free and reduced price lunch. Of course, there are other people in this town who need assistance. We suggested that they use the language that some high school trips do of asking parents to pledge what they can afford. And we are making the statement that whatever parents can pledge, we will cover the rest of it. We also will be asking as part of that, if there are parents who can pledge more than the cost of the trip, that they're welcome to do so. The money will come into the PTO. No one will be denied the opportunity to go. And Mr. Burr in the past with DC personally made contact with the families who did not sign up for the trip. And there are many reasons why students may choose not to go on an overnight trip to DC for lots of different reasons, but he made contact with them to confirm that it wasn't a financial reason. And we discussed this at the meeting, and it's our hope and expectation that our administrators would do the same for this trip. So I agree with you 100,000%, Michelle. And I actually feel like in this circumstance with this trip, we don't have the funding in our budget to take all 300 8th graders or 275 to these. But if the school believes they're important, and we are committing that we will make up the gap between what parents are able to pay and what the cost of the trip is. And I know PTO was also talking about fundraising. So that 350 was the outset, the sort of the most it could possibly be, and that they would be trying to take a $200 deposit initially and make up the rest. So I'm excited about that. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I would like to add as well, I remember when my son went to DC, there were 4 kids in the grade who didn't go. And Mr. Burr knew the reason for each one, and I hope he does the same here. For whatever reason, there might be parents that don't want to send their kids to New York these days. And I'd also like to just, let's take a step back and think about the opportunity for children to go see a Broadway show, right? And how many children are going to have had that opportunity and might not have it if we don't offer it? And not only is it a Broadway show, it's Hamilton, which really sets, you know, the expectations of what you think on their head, right? When there's a Black George Washington and a Hispanic Hamilton, and it also shows kids that, you know, the sky's the limit. So, and then Hershey Park is fun, and these kids have been through a lot. They're suffering. We've heard about the mental health. I mean, I think we all want the same things, and I don't think they're incompatible. So I really give a lot of credit to the PTO. They really went out of their way to make sure, and they worked very hard to see that the kids could have something meaningful to cap off their very sad middle school years, or lonely middle school years. So I give them a lot of
If we
credit.
can figure out a way to
Mhm.
make that process sustainable, if we can figure out a way to institutionalize that process so that when we have school activities, we know that every single kid is going to be able to go, and not, hey, we might raise this money, hey, like this doing it on a case-by-case basis is not something that is going to ensure over time that we take a look at this practice. And, you know, I love Hamilton. That's great, you know, but there are other Broadway shows that are a lot cheaper and could serve the same purpose. I love Hershey Park too, but you know, again, you know, we just need to really be a lot more thoughtful and a lot more sensitive about the status and situation of families in our town. And I just happen to think that something that happens during the school day for $350, not good. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. I would just add about Hamilton that is civics, and 8th grade is civics. So I actually think it's like a brilliant idea, but that's just me. Anyway, can we get a vote, please, Mr.
And
Bolden?
also to add in, it was actually the middle school administration as well as the PTO.
Oh, thank you.
that get the shout out for this.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. I missed that part of the meeting.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
No.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Dean Durbin,
Yes.
Laura Franceschi,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Bob Christopher.
Yes.
Motion.
Oh, yeah. All right. Anything else? No? Okay. Moving on to item N, student services, and 1, professional consulting services. Moving on to O, business, financial
Action
report. That's an action. What's an action item?
And one.
It
And
doesn't
one.
have to be for me. Thanks, Matt, if I'm the only one that asked.
Well, it's an action item now, so we'll
Okay.
Can I get a motion? Rob, second Mara.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
Yes.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Dean Durbin,
No.
Lauren Franceschi,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Bob Christopher.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, now moving on to item O, O1, financial reports, O2, fire and evacuation drills, O3, resolution awarding capital lease bid, O4, Spiesel Architect Group. Is that an action item? No? And O5, registration
Yes.
travel.
It is action.
Oh, it is. My apologies. O4, can I get a motion? Brian, second. Beth?
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
Yes.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
No.
Dean Durbin,
Yes.
Lauren Franceschi,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Bob Christopher.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on to item O5, registration travel agenda, then moving on to P1, public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? You've certainly earned that right.
I don't. s-
Ah, we do. We have Miss Bajoni.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of Swarthmore's cashless campus, but I think it addresses some of the concerns that Michelle has mentioned of having students who are in need having to jump through hoops in order to ensure that they have funding for various things. And so the idea behind the cashless campus is that there's a lot of money in a pot and that all students don't have to pay anything. So I don't know if there's a way where we could, ask parents to say, if you used to spend this much on trips for your children, could you donate that? And then we have a pot and then it just gets distributed as kids need and nobody has to jump through the hoops. And that's a really equitable way to handle things. Everybody is treated the same way. Everybody has the same expectation. I don't know to what extent it's practical, but I think it sort of goes to the essence of really making sure that all students can get it. I know my parents never admitted that we couldn't afford anything. And I didn't get to go to my 8th grade Washington trip. Those were things that I just didn't get to do. And so I definitely feel for students who come from families for whatever reasons who won't say. And if there's a way to ensure that those hoops don't have to be jumped through, that is a better way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone else, Mr. Bolden?
No.
No. Okay, so let's move on to item Q, the consent vote. The approved consent agenda items. Can I get a motion, please? Beth, second. Mara?
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder, Michelle,
Yes.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Jean Durbin,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Bob Christopher.
Yes.
Consent agenda passes.
All right, now moving on to item S1, harassment, intimidation, and bullying hearing appeal. Resolved. Do I read it or do I get a motion first?
Oh, you can read it.
Okay, resolved that the board affirms the superintendent's recommendation regarding HIB case number 236845 after conducting a parent hearing to appeal the superintendent's recommendation at tonight's closed session board meeting. Can I get a motion, please? Beth, second. Brian?
Daphne Kendall,
No.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
Yes.
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Jean Durbin,
No.
Mara Franceschi,
No.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
and Rob is an abstention by law. Motion passes.
Okay. And with that, so we're going on to item T1, closing comment of the board. I think we've all had enough of each other for tonight. So I would like to thank each and every one of you for your service to the children of Princeton this past school year, this past calendar year, and wish you all the best for the holidays and a very happy and healthy 2023. And we will see you all back on January 3rd at 6 o'clock. Does anyone else want to have anything to say? No? All right. And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn? I'm sorry.
Daphne, I just wanted to thank you for your service this year as president. It's really been great and much appreciated.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. All right. And with that, can we get a motion to adjourn? Rob, second. Jean, all in favor?
Aye.
And with that, a good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Take care.
everybody.